Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Chris Bircher, Director of Technical Services here at CTC, and today we are going to go over our project activity logger from both the BIM data suite and from Hive. And I'll make sure to point out the few differences between both. Before I begin though, I want to encourage everyone to ask questions throughout the entire presentation. I will do my best to answer them in line as we go, and we'll certainly make time at the end to answer any that I may have missed. And then lastly, this is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel shortly after the presentation has completed. So with that said, I'll catch my breath and we'll go. All right. Now, as during the project lifecycle, specifically the portion that our projects live in Revit, the files themselves tend to incur a project degradation, right? The files open slower, it takes longer to save, takes longer to regenerate an instance or like a group, or you edit a property and after clicking OK, it slows down, takes a while. You start running into these unnecessary errors in Revit or random crashes, and which makes things take longer. We end up having to sacrifice certain areas of the project because we have to deal with all this other stuff. Things are delayed across the board. And so we've got a way to find out all that stuff, or at least to find out when or why potentially something slowed down. We have the ability to start to introduce ourselves to various reporting features within the CTC toolkits that will hopefully guide you to the right location where these issues may be coming up. So today with Project Activity Logger, we're going to discuss it in how to set it up and get things going, introduce you to the quote unquote interface, right? There really isn't an interface, which is why it's in quotes like that. The big deal is the little bit of setup and the reporting. And then I'll show you how to get your hands or how this works depending on if you have BIM Data Suite or if you have Hive. So let's go, right? Now, so I've mentioned there are two BIM Data Suites two Project Activity Loggers. One's for BIM Data Suite and one is for Hive. And where's my Revit? There it is. So on the surface, you can't even tell that it's there. We won't have any indication that the Project Activity Logger service, or PAL, is what I'm going to call it quite a bit. We have no idea that PAL is installed, and that's fine. Just let everyone know that, hey, we're going to start getting project metrics from you. And the way it works and the way the tool itself works is, I'm just going to pull this over here so you can kind of get an idea here. There's a service that runs on the machine called PAL Poster. And when you sync to Central in Revit, the PAL Poster is going to start filling up with these JSON files. And I'm in the cloud folder here. So right now I'm looking at the PAL location for Hive. And the other one for BIM Data Suite PAL is right here. And you can see it'll fill up with the JSON files, letting you know that we recorded some data. And then eventually the poster will kick in and these files are going to disappear. And depending on how many other files you have or how many people are trying to sync at the same time, the level of communication going into the system, it may take a minute for these to disappear. And if you have the Windows update like I have, you actually have to constantly hit refresh on your keyboard until it actually disappears on you, because mine doesn't. But here you go. I had one, it's now gone. And if I go back, oh, there they go. Now they're going away. So you can see it's doing its job, it's logging its stuff. And that's really all that as an end user that you need to worry about, right? Are my files being logged to the system? If these folders have journal entries and session GUIDs, but no JSONs, it's logging. You may have a couple of stragglers left over simply because something interrupted the process. We can always get, those will get logged hopefully in the next session. Now, where does that data go? What do I do with it? Now, depending on what you're working with, the data goes to one of two different locations. Well, the data will go to a different location. We're going to start with BIM Data Suite. With BIM Data Suite, this data is 100% going to your SQL Server behind your firewall. And that information is yours and yours. I mean, and no one, well, it's always yours, but it's yours to do what you want with it, right? We can also support the Azure SQL Server. So if you're using that as your SQL database, go for it. That's how mine is set up right now. I'm using my my Azure database here, and you'll get your little CTC BIM data. And if you've used BIM Data Suite or you've seen demos on it before, you know all the data is recorded here. These are all of the PAL tables specifically, and you have access to all the data as you see fit. And although viewing data in a SQL database like this, if you're not a SQL database administrator or familiar with SQL, is next to impossible. I can barely run a query to order my data by a date or alphabetically. This is not my tool to use, but it's here. And for those that can. My tool, as probably most of you, for reviewing data is going to be Power BI. And with Power BI, we give you access to your own Power BI file to start with. It's a template. You'll get the ability to pull this information as soon as it's being recorded. And the way this will work is you'll get the file, you open it for the first time, you're going to see a bunch of data from us during our development, but you edit the parameters, you put in the appropriate company ID and URL for where things are going, and voila, your data will soon be present. And you get a bunch of information about the project, what the file sizes, the project names and numbers that have been defined, who's been working on your files, how much time are they spending in them, and how many views do we have, how many CAD links or Revit links or any other important linked file, placed rooms, unplaced rooms. If you've got warnings and you're logging the warnings, those are going to be present here. So we've got a bunch of data that is at your fingertips now, and in a format that is easier to read than trying to navigate through an XLS file or a CSV file or anything else, just a text report generated, right? And if you know anything about Power BI and understand how to stitch together your own charts, go for it. You've got access to all of the tables that are of value for the project activity logging setup. Build them out. You can do with whatever you need to here within the confines of the project activity data that you're receiving. And the last bit to this, and basically you stitch it up for all your projects. How do you do that? Well, there's a tool that comes with PAL and really comes with the BIM Data Suite called BIM Data Admin. And this is the tool that you're going to use to set everything up. I must have closed it. So I'm going to open it back up here real quick. And this is where your project definitions will get created. You can link it up to a project management type tool, like say like a Deltek Vision or something like that. You can go ahead and link things up that way. And so that you don't have to manually re-enter in all of this information here. But once you have your project number and name, add the file paths where everything lives. And as you start collecting, or as your users start syncing the data up, you're going to start collecting information, and it's going to start to appear in SQL and in turn in your Power BI files. And the setup for this is a little bit more involved because we're dealing with SQL Server. We're dealing with another service called Project Snapshot Exporter. BIM Data Suite as a whole is a much more robust and powerful utility that gets access to a lot of Revit-specific data that, which is why you get everything kind of in the kit. So for the Data Suite PAL, that's pretty much it, right? You get, and the kick is just to make sure you put this service on all Revit workstations. And then any project that those users work on, you're now going to have access to it. You don't need to build out projects like this. The whole point of building out your project is to organize that data a little bit better instead of it just being a massive pool of data. Now we know what project things are associated with without having to look up the file name. So, and then you can see how many files are associated with a project and keep on going down the list. Now, where'd my BI file go? I just had it. Here it is. So I just wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to see kind of what it's doing here. Sync to central times versus file size. You can see how over time warning counts are going up. The sync to central times are taking longer. Every now and again, I get a dip or a spike in the open times, and you can actually look at these times and see how long it took and who it was that was having that problem. And you can try to go back and figure out, well, why are they having this problem? Where, what about this one time took it so long? Was it a sync? Was it a detach? Or I'm sorry, not a detach. Was there an audit being run at that time? Was there a previous issue? Maybe that kind of starts to coincide with I guess the sync to central has always been poor in this case. But shortly thereafter, the warnings decreased real quick. Maybe there's some correlation here in what they were doing. I don't know. But you can start to kind of try to put those pieces together looking at some of this data. Yeah. So, and you can see between these two, there's a big gap or a huge amount. And this is the tab where you can start to find out the IP address that they synced from to see if maybe they were on Wi-Fi versus something else. You could see, actually, yeah, see, here's Sean had 2 different connection types and actually 2 different computers, it looks like. So you're going to see that gap. And you're going to start to see those discrepancies potentially, and then additional information about the project itself. All right. Let's see. And the warnings are all nice and spelled out. View reports based off the model and the user. You can see how much time was spent in certain views. If I do that, you get an idea. This view got 50 minutes of editing time, and by me, look at me go, getting a lot of work done that day. And you just start to get a breakdown of what's being done, depending on the project file that you pick on and the Revit file that you chose to go for with it. Let's see. Oh, that was this one, and this user. Nope. I'm trying to find which file that was, and I can't. Well, that's all right. It's probably one of the ones that I don't have linked up properly, and that's okay. I haven't mapped everything to a project. So as we keep going here, we get some basic user summary and what files they've been working on, who's been spending how much time in what file. Helps kind of determine, are people working on the projects that they're supposed to be working on. And then, just kind of redisplaying some of the same information that you've seen before, but in different formats, so you can kind of get an idea of what you want or how things will look. Take and pick what you want. Revit versions on which machine, which updates are applied, so you can kind of start to see if your firms are fully up to date, or if you've got a lot of updates to push out, or if you're allowing individuals to install updates and you find that everyone is still running the vanilla version of Revit from that year, maybe you shouldn't be letting them apply their own updates. I don't know. Anyway, add-ins, Revit versions per project, and then additional tabs down here at the end that I kind of built thinking around. So this is the Data Suite project activity logger. The Hive project activity logger is very similar, and for the most part, we're gathering the same data. There's a service that needs to be installed that will get installed when Hive CMS is installed. So when you install Hive, you're getting this service right out of the gate. It's logging everything to that PalQ folder, that cloud folder that I showed you earlier here. And the data will log here temporarily before it's posted to the CTC Hive portal, where you then are able to log in and view some data. Now, this one has a couple of different options for how you are going to view that data. And if I can find my portal now, there we go. This is all set up in the portal. When you log in, you get presented with the dashboard, and everything is configured here on the Projects tab. So if you're using the Project Analytics portion of Hive or the PAL, this is where all the projects are defined, similar to how BIM Data Suite has their BIM Data Admin. This is your Project Admin page. You set the project up, you specify the file paths, and the key piece to make this work, once you've got the installation done and you're setting up your projects, there's a config file that needs to be placed on your user's machines. And this is like your license file. This is what tells this Revit workstation to log all of this data to your corporate portal, so that you get to see the data and it doesn't accidentally get written somewhere else, or just doesn't get written at all because it doesn't know where to go. So this is that final step to creating that connection between the Revit user station and your portal and the dashboards here. Now, excuse me. Now for reviewing data, this is where the options come into play. We have a couple of different ways you can review some of this data. Option A is in the portal itself. On the dashboard, we have a series of areas here to review project data. And it's the same data. The PAL service in Hive and the PAL service in BIM Data Suite, it's the same set of tools. The difference being that Data Suite has the snapshot exporter, Hive does not. And not everybody needs to take snapshots, or not everyone has a SQL server that they can write all of that data to. So, and this is a little easier to implement then in that case. So you get, it's the same information: file size, deadlines, who's spending the most time on projects, project number, contributors, Revit files associated with those projects. And the more files you have, the longer lists are going to be. And you can just start to select the file, the project, the file, and you can start to get some of this information. Load times, warnings, imports and links, groups and families, levels and rooms, And if you start clicking on some of these, you'll start to see how many floor plans are in this file and how many sheets, schedules, and ceiling plans, sections, and all the good stuff. So you can start to dial it in a little bit and notice that you've got, maybe in-place families has been known to cause issues in your firm because it just starts to bog down the file. And maybe you've got, in my case, I've got 16, which to me is still too many, but maybe you've got 160 and they're all unique. And some views are taking longer to regenerate than they should be, or you're having a printing issue. And that's because one of these in-place families had a CAD file imported into it and exploded. That we won't know here, but maybe the sheer number of in-place families gets you to start digging in there. What will give you the information is knowing that there's however many line styles and patterns and whatnot. So same 6 essential durations that you run into from before. Warnings that we're getting an update to the detail tab, so this is going to be completely different, and it's already under construction. And the warnings tab that details out the warnings that you're working with to give you more information. I haven't opened this file in a little bit, so I have to do another quick little sync on it. But you know what it is? I know what it is. I'm not recording details on that one. So I should step back on this. We have the ability to control what you are looking for, and to an extent. Do I care about the add-ins? Do I care about audits, view switches, printing, warnings? Do I want a summary or do I want the details? So the warning summary is just the warning and the IDs. The detailed warnings list is each individual element listed with that warning and the other affected elements to go along with it. We're logging summarized warnings because it keeps the database lower or smaller. If you're working on a bunch of small projects and you want that detailed information, go ahead and log it. That's totally fine. It's going to be one or the other. And that's true with BIM Data Suite's PAL as well. You can control what these exact same settings are. When you're working in the SQL environment, that does fill up a database real quickly. So in some cases, I would tell firms not to get all the extra detail in the warnings because you still got to end up going into Revit to fix it anyway. Getting the element ID and the actual warning message is enough for me in most cases. So I just wanted to point out where that is, because that will control what you see to an extent. Now, so we've looked at all the reports already, and these are effectively the exact same reports that you had in the Power BI file. Now, maybe with this method, there may be some reports that you want or that you need to change some of the filters on, or whatever the case may be. You can't edit the data here in the portal. But what you can do is download your own Power BI file and get your Excel reports for the data, stitch it all together, and review it. There, oh, now here it comes in Power BI. And this is this is downloaded straight from Hive. Now, with all of your PAL data starting on tab 11. And the reason why it starts on tab 11 is because Hive records more than just project and activity. There's more that comes along with it that I can touch on briefly, but if you need all the nuts and bolts and all the information about what Hive is logging, there's videos that you're going to want to watch on that. So, but again, now you have the same data that we were looking at before, same data that you had in the portal, and now you can do with it what you want. Now, this lists all of my projects, not just, the dashboard is listing what's currently active and what people are synchronizing to and what is actually being edited. this is going to show me all the projects. And if the model hasn't been opened in 6 months, I'm not going to have any data to look at here. I'll still see the project number, but it's not going to show much data. This is effectively the dashboards here, and the Excel reports are effectively giving you about 30 days worth of information. So you're going to have to download and continually update this to stay current. But in some cases, maybe that's good enough. You don't need to go ahead and do everything or gather all, combine all the data together. Now, if you do, we've had a lot of requests for this from a number of groups to get more data. And I don't blame them. Data's great. So we actually gave you guys the ability to have more data with direct access to the Hive API, reporting API. So you'll get all of your project activity data. You'll get any other Hive CMS search information. You'll get user account information and license information all in one shot. And this is a by request venture. If you would like access to the Hive reporting API with the reports and the ability to do that, there's a two-part process. One is I would watch the video that we did a few months back on the CTC API reporting, and there's information there on how there's a couple of different ways to gather and view the data. You can view it in Postman. There's a workflow to extract the JSON files to bring it into whatever database type tool you want. There's a Power BI file that looks exactly like you're seeing here on my screen now that you can download. But then there's an API resource key that's unique to your organization that you would still need to request. And once you have that, you would come to the edit parameters field here, punch that API key in, and hit apply, and your data will refresh and be visible here in the system. So you still get your PAL data, which is why you're here, all the projects, all the hours and model sizes and who's been working on it. Some of the tables here are a little different and they're laid out in a different order, but the information's the same. Let's see, there was one here that was rather different. But really, the big stuff here that you get now that you didn't get before is access to your CloudShift license usage information, so that you can see what products are being used, how frequently, what's the most used product in your office by how much, and then by users. And I didn't sync up my user usage, so that's why my tab is broken there. And I did that intentionally because I was running out of time getting my stuff refreshed. But you can get, your search data. If you're using project and family standards, you can start to record some of that data, figure out what families are, in good shape and which ones are not. Get a list of your users and groups and roles and all kinds of good stuff that you get with this that you wouldn't get in just a normal project analytics report. So you do get some additional data going with your API keys and this Power BI file that you wouldn't normally get. At any rate, the project activity data still the same. Okay. Then so to that I feel like I'm missing something here for you guys. No, there was one question that came in that I feel like I should answer right now. Will this bring data on all projects, or do you have to register them? that, which is the previous process that was always done. You never have to register the project for either of these. You just need the tools installed, the services installed. What will happen though is if you don't have things registered, everything is going to fall into project 0, and now all of those. So all you're going to get are the. Let me jump to my PAL stuff again. If it's all under project 0, you're not going to know which projects have the most time spent on them. Your blank area is going to take over the world, and it'll be harder to determine which data is tied to which project because you don't have a project. And if you have access to your own Power BI files and you're doing your own data manipulation, you can build those reports and do it by Revit file if you'd like. And you can associate things up accordingly. But it's an added step that you wouldn't normally need to take if you added the projects. Now, yes, project setup, as with any project, does take some time. And we are aware of that and are finding ways to enhance that process. BIM Data Suite, we can incorporate from Deltek to help build out projects if necessary. And with projects, or I'm sorry, with Hives format, you can import projects, but that doesn't necessarily give you the ability to link up all the file paths and such. But you can still import the list of projects. So we're getting there. We're working on some back-end things to make that process even more efficient so that you don't have to do some intentional editing as frequently with a lot of this stuff. So that was a question that came up that I wanted to make sure I got answered. Now, so that takes care of everything for today. I want to thank you all for joining me. It's been a pleasure. I hope you saw something in there that you liked or picked up on something that you missed and from a previous session. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar in a couple of weeks. Because of the holidays, we will not be doing one the day after Christmas. So I hope all of you have a wonderful holiday, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.